Hello everyone, my name is Alexandria Thomas. I'm a nurse and today I'll be talking about telemedicine in the ICU. Telemedicine is any medicine performed remotely. It's been used in more basic forms for centuries. For example, a letter asking a colleague's advice is telemedicine. We've transitioned from letters to telegraphs to telephones to video and beyond. Telemedicine is a very inclusive term. Many things that we do in the medical field are actually telemedicine. This includes the viewing of an electronic medical record of a patient, like when you're outside the hospital, or calling a consulting physician, or sending x-rays to a radiologist to have them interpreted. There are two main ways that people are familiar with telemedicine in the ICU. So that's video consults and then fully remote telemedicine. Video consults include audio and visual information to a consulting specialist. So this can include the entire care team. It could be an ICU nurse for a call for wound care consult and assistance with the care, or a specialist could be called if the hospital doesn't have that specialty there, especially in a low volume case. So you could call your infectious disease expert. Remote telemedicine includes audio, visual, and patient data for continuous surveillance from a secondary location. And those people are always involved in the patient's care. Remote telemedicine in the ICU has many benefits. This is especially true for small hospitals and hospitals in rural areas. It allows for improved access to intensivists and specialists, and this is true in a few different ways. If the hospital doesn't have 24/7 intensivist coverage, it allows staffing to be covered for 24/7 without hiring multiple extra intensivists. Additionally, it could take the doctor 15 minutes to get from the hospital, or you could use remote telemedicine and they can be accessed in seconds. It also allows for more support for your staff. The nursing team is supported because they have access to someone 24/7, and the physicians have the ability to confer and consult with someone to ensure that the patient is receiving the best evidence-based care. It also decreases the likelihood of having to transfer the patient. If a higher level of care is needed, it can still be provided remotely, which is good for the hospital and the patient. Our population is aging, and our ICU patients are increasingly more complex. Remote telemedicine gives some relief of the pressure placed on big ICUs by allowing smaller ICUs to care for more complex patients. It has been associated with a reduced length of stay, which again, it's better for the hospital and the patients. And remote ICU can reduce medical errors by continuous monitoring of the patient data, integrated data into a risk prediction algorithm, allowing for instant second opinions, and by facilitating transfer of knowledge. And importantly, in the current climate, it can limit exposure to pathogens. So if your patients can be monitored remotely, then the amount of times that staff have to enter the room can be decreased and your exposure is decreased. Meta-analysis studies have not shown conclusively that 24/7 coverage from an intensivist reduces mortality, but it has been shown to reduce sepsis, renal failure, blood product use, and hospital length of stay. Currently, less than 20% of hospitals have 24/7 intensivist coverage. 80% of the interventions initiated by the remote telemedicine team were done while the on-site team was away. And studies also show that remote telemedicine increases adherence to evidence-based practice by including checklists and prompts. Remote telemedicine does have a few drawbacks. For one, traditional charges to a patient's insurance does not always include telemedicine, and it can be hard to receive reimbursement for the hospital. There's also a reluctance to adapt. This can be from directors of the hospital, care managers, and nurses. And this is anywhere from a simple dislike of change to people not seeing how it could benefit them. Additionally, many states do not have the legislature present to provide a legal standard of care, which can make the care team members wary of medical legal ramifications. Currently, we have the technology to listen to heart and lung sounds remotely. We have cameras and otoscopes that allow the remote care team member to see what we see, as well as stationary cameras mounted in the rooms. The example here is a camera with an otoscope and tongue depressor attachments, and it also works as a stethoscope. There are also ultrasound probes that send the imaging in real time to your remote care team. One of the most important parts of remote telemedicine is that the vital signs, telemetry, and other biometric information is being sent in real time to the remote telemedicine team. That way they can interpret and input in real time. And importantly, when a hospital is becoming telemedicine capable, they have to ensure that the EMR software can interact with the telemedicine software. So it has to be through a secure network to guarantee patient privacy. One of the cool things about the remote telemedicine network is that most of them include embedded risk prediction algorithms to help flag data trends about patients that the care team might not traditionally notice. And, of course, the coolest one is robots. The one on your screen right now is the InTouch Vita. This is one of the fanciest on the market currently. It can auto drive around the hospital, so you tell it where to go and it gets there however it needs to get there. It has a high definition pan, tilt, and zoom camera, and it has a big monitor to show the patient who is involved in their care. Additionally, it has the ability to integrate all the technology that we talked about earlier with the stethoscope, otoscope, all that fun stuff. So, how does it translate to models and simulation? The most direct answer is that we can use simulations to improve our telemedicine skills. This can include end-to-end live training for telemedicine. This is especially important when the hospital starts implementing telemedicine. Team members can use simulation in practice for telemedicine handoff and assessing a patient through a screen, which is a little different than most of us are used to, as well as just using the equipment in general. Studies suggest that staff members are more likely to use remote telemedicine if they're familiar with it. It can also be used in creating models. The integrated data collection and algorithms allow for models to be created more easily. The data can be collected to make models to show trends on specific diagnoses with various comorbidities. And additionally, we can make more accurate simulation scenarios because we already have the data there to have a real patient. Another important benefit to simulation is the increased availability of specialists. Most hospitals don't have every medical specialist available and working there, so the overall knowledge on a particular subject can improve by having a remote specialist teach a new skill by simulation. If your mannequins are able to connect to the remote telehealth network, then the specialist will be able to see that data and use the mannequin in their simulation as well. And most importantly to me is the ability to have drills with the telemedicine team. So this can be for common scenarios like self-extubation or cardiac arrest to foster communication amongst the care team and prepare them for using the telemedicine in their practice. But it can also be used for low volume scenarios that the hospital doesn't see often, like therapeutic hypothermia following a cardiac arrest and ROS. What is in the future? The hardest part to overcome is integration. Various systems that the hospital and simulation centers have may not talk to each other. Can their electronic medical record talk to the biometric monitors? Can those talk to the simulators? Can all of your software talk to your remote telemedicine team? Another issue is portability. It's nice if it works in one room in the ICU, but can it also be used in the emergency department? Can it be used on labor and delivery? Improvements in network infrastructure can allow multiple learners to access interactive simulations at once. So, for example, remote telemedicine practice with a virtual reality patient and multiple specialties all called in at once. So that takes a good network infrastructure, and that's something that we'll have to make sure is implemented as things grow and improve. Another possibility in the future is bedside telemedicine telerobotic procedures. So we have robots in the OR, and some of those can be used remotely, but bedside remote procedures still have some improvement to do. A central line placed remotely by a robot controlled by a doctor could be coming. This would be very useful, especially, again, in our current environment. What if we could intubate a COVID patient remotely? But we're still a little bit away from that. And finally, haptic feedback. Haptic feedback is touch feedback. Most medical personnel would agree that being able to feel is an important part of assessing a patient and even vital to many of our procedures and skills. Integrating haptic feedback into robotics would allow us to palpate an abdomen or add another layer of information for your remote telehealth team. As you can see, telemedicine has come a long way, but it still has so much untapped potential. As it grows, its role in models and simulation will grow as well. So thank you all for your time and have a great day.